Hello, everyone. In this video, we will be looking at the similarities and differences between languages like Akkadian and Arabic. How similar are the two languages? At the very beginning, there is a lot of similarity in common vocabulary. They're both Semitic languages, and these languages share terminology that has common roots. And so from these common roots, we'll find a lot of common vocabulary. And I'm not sure where the count lies, but it has to be somewhere upwards of 60 to 70% of the words are probably shared with common roots, but they may not necessarily be utilized in the same ways, especially because of the gap in time that we see between the two languages. In fact, Akkadian is recorded in a much older form, and it ends about 2,000 years ago, let's say, whereas Arabic starts coming on the scene a few centuries afterwards, and then it really blossoms in the centuries after that in the Middle Ages up until the present day, where it's continually developing. And if we just look here, we can find some common examples. Akharu in Akkadian, akhara in Arabic, to delay, get sick, marasu versus marido. The difference here is interesting because this sa in Akkadian is a the in Arabic. And this is a common shift we see between the two languages, where many of the words that that utilize this sa sound in Akkadian will, in the Arabic version, exhibit a the. Others are more straightforward and direct. Waladu versus walada, gave birth. Interestingly, that connects better between Akkadian and Arabic than it does, let's say, Akkadian and Hebrew, or Akkadian and Aramaic, where there's a w or a waw to yod or y, a w to y, or a waw to yod shift. So we'd have yeled, let's say, or yalad in Hebrew, that you're not going to see in Akkadian. Akkadian is going to align better with the Arabic in that case. Then there's going to be other words where you'll have a word for gate, let's say, where Arabic and Akkadian better align together than they would against Aramaic tar'a or Hebrew sha'ir. So there's an interesting, connection here. And you can see by the example, we have babu in Akkadian. I'm representing it both phonetically and with the logogram it's commonly written with to the left. And then bawaba or bab in Arabic. You may have heard of bab, I don't know, someplace if you're reading places, you'll see it prefixed, like in Syria, you have Bab-Toma district. In Iraq and Baghdad, you have the Bab-Shargi, which is a Shiite-based neighborhood. And then in places like Jerusalem, you'll have any number of city gates, named with Bab something. And so Bab Jadid, for example. These basically note the gate or direction of a locale or a place, right? So the gate is often associated with locales. But we see that in Akkadian as well as Arabic. Now, the other way in which these languages are similar comes in derived terminology. What do we mean by that? Well, take, for example, the Akkadian verb zabalu, which means to carry or deliver. Zabalu. If you're an Arabic speaker, that may sound a little bit familiar. We have this word, zbale, in Arabic, and that basically means trash, rubbish, junk, something like that. So you can tell they don't necessarily mean the same thing, but you could see how carrying something out or delivering it to, a trash heap, getting it away from you, would be something that we do with trash, right? So languages tend to work like this. You can see sort of a development in, the terminology over time, where the earlier meaning may be a little more general, and then it evolves into something a little specific. Now I want us to look at just a line. I was, going over some of the Hammurabi texts that I made available to the public, and one was Law 14 that I have in the collection. And I'll just go ahead and read the Akkadian once more, and then we'll kind of look at the Arabic, because we have Arabic versions or Arabic translations of this, and I thought it was an interesting thing to talk about. So in Akkadian, we have Shuma Awilum, Mar Awilim, Sechram, Ishtarik, Iddak. Okay, so if a citizen, we normally see if a man, that's kind of what you see in Akkadian translations, but there's different words for man. And so the Law Code of Hammurabi makes note of a couple different classes in the Law Code. And so I'm taking the opportunity to call it a citizen. It's maybe citizen's not the right word. Maybe it's the upper class. Hard to distinguish, but I'm sure there's been research and papers done on that. All that to say, if a citizen steals the young son of a citizen or a citizen's son, he shall be smitten. We usually say he should be put to death or something like that, but I think smiting is the better sense of it. And if you read a translation that says, if a man steals a young man's son, he shall be put to death, that's sufficient for our understanding. I think a deeper level may reveal some of these other nuances. Well, the Arabic translation I got a hold of goes and reads, إذا السيد سرق الابن الصغير لسيد آخر فيجب أن يعدم, which means if a master, the Sayyid, stole the young son of another master, probably shouldn't have that comma there, he must be executed. Fayajib an yu'dam means he must be executed. Now, there's a way to do the translation with more direct cognates between Akkadian and Arabic. We could use the Fusha version of if. We could say in rather than idha, or izza, as it's more commonly said in the dialects I'm familiar with. In awal saraka ibn saghir li awal yandak. Now that's interesting. It's kind of, how would you say, irregular, right? It would be like if you took a thesaurus for an English thesaurus and just chose a bunch of words that were similar, to the sentence and then swap them. Maybe nobody talks like that, right? And so places like Iraq, these words will be well understood. Different countries may not use that vocabulary actively. Additionally, you have words that don't mean the same thing. So you notice the translation here: if a first stole a small son of a first, he will be pounded. That's kind of my translation. Maybe someone has something similar or different. A first what? Right? Again, that kind of goes back to this idea of a first level person. And thus I put something like citizen, awilum, in the Akkadian, versus, look at the middle, Arabic option 1. We have is a sayyid, right? A sayyid is a master. And so a master, that's kind of noting some kind of hierarchy, a social hierarchy, someone who has control or domain, I don't know, rank, maybe is a better word, rank over another person. So even the Arabic translation is trying to convey the sense that, is conveyed by the Akkadian, and it wants to make it intelligible. And that's really the key in translating. You want to go for intelligibility, not necessarily, a parallel work, right? The parallel work on the bottom would be irregular and kind of hawkish. People may understand the words, but be like, okay, what are you trying to say? Right? You ever encounter someone who goes, well, what are you trying to say? Like, I understand your words. Now let's put them together. And that's kind of what's happening. You can see Akkadian and Arabic there is definitely a common root that brings them very closely together, but do the people who speak these languages use these words? Now, of course, I'm skipping over the fact that there's tons of Arabic dialects and any number of ways to translate this. So we'll leave that for another time. Let's just look at a couple of the similarities between the Akkadian and the Arabic. So Akkadian and the first option Arabic, we have sakhram versus saghir. These are cognates. Now, you'll notice this hooked H in the Akkadian, and that is the way that many of the otherwise guttural letters will often manifest. And so the ghain is the Arabic version, saghir, for the young or smaller, person. whereas Akkadian, we have tsachram, same root. The other, of course, is the verb saraqa, and saraqa in Akkadian is ishtariq. So you do have a shift between a sh, a shin, and a sa between Akkadian and Arabic that often takes place. Something similar happens in Hebrew and Aramaic against Arabic. You have, let's say, Mshiach, Christ or Messiah in modern, or in Syriac for that matter. And in Arabic, you'd have Masih. So Mashiach with a sh sound versus Masih with an s sound, right? Shin versus sin, the name of the letters. And of course, this ta in the Akkadian is it's an infixed, sign for the perfect here. And that's really drawing us back to the same root, which is what would be an S2 or we'll just say shin resh kof versus sin resh kof, noting the common shift. What else is there between those? Well, not a whole lot. Between the common or understandable, the intelligible Arabic and the Akkadian. Now, if we turn our attention toward, the theoretical or the Arabic with cognates versus Akkadian, there's a lot more going on. Of course, I have Ishtarik and Saraqa both still highlighted. We just talked about that. Now our word for if. In Akkadian, we have Shumma versus the Arabic in. In is a older or Fusha version of saying it, and same in Aramaic. And it differs from the way people speak Arabic today, where you'd say itha or iza. Shumma and in are actually cognate at a certain level. Proto-Semitic is probably shin. And what happens is there's this phonological process where the initial sh becomes an h and drops off. And so it would be shun would become in. What's happening in Akkadian, this ma is an enclitic ma, and it's letting us know that shimma should, it's sort of emphatic, you could say. That ma is changing the n at the end of shun into a shim, so shimma. Anyway, a long story to tell you that they actually are most likely related historically. Now, we can also look at the word awilum or awilim in its two different declensions here and compare that against the Arabic awil. So awil means first in Arabic. We say it means a man in Akkadian, but really we probably mean a man of the first class or a citizen. There could be, like I said earlier, there could be some further literature on that. Just because there's other words for like male, not just male, but a man, a mutu, that we see in Akkadian. So this one is sort of unique, but there has to be at some level a commonality between the two. Well, we also noted Sechram and Saghir as being similar. Finally, we have our last word. In Akkadian, it's iddak versus yandak in Arabic. The root here is duck, which means to pound, to knock, to like strike, smite, things like that. You could probably ring a bell with this verb, if I'm not mistaken. So the root here is the same, but there's also something else similar going on, and that is the form is also, it's a nun stem, an n stem. We call it in Akkadian. I think it's measure 7 in Arabic, if I remember correctly. So what that means is it's sort of passive. You'll see this in Hebrew. You'll call it the nifal in Hebrew, but in Akkadian, it's an n stem. And so the n is actually, we should be reading induk instead of iddak, but what ends up happening is the nun assimilates to the dental, to the D, and you get doubling, iddak. And of course, you'll notice the I class vowel, iddak versus yandak. The I and the Y, they indicate similar form. So there's a lot going on. Theoretically, that's the same between Akkadian and Arabic. Now, does that mean that these are mutually intelligible? Not really. Not really. When it comes to usage, in fact, that's one of the things where languages start splitting from one another. That's how dialects develop. People choose different They'll choose a different collection of words to convey the same thing. Sometimes those continue diverging, and then your dialect, separates into its own language. Languages can have common structures, as these do. These are both Semitic. You'll notice the verb or the word order is a little different. Akkadian follows a subject, object, verb format, and that's not really common with other Semitic languages. So in the end, yes, they are related. Yes, one really helps in knowing the other, but can a person off the street just understand? It's unlikely. It's unlikely. And that's why we will call these different languages and not dialects of one another. So I conclude by drawing a comparison between Akkadian to Arabic, saying it's sort of like Latin to Spanish or Italian or French or something like that, where you have these common roots, and these roots develop over time and among different people, and they eventually, are productive on their own, and they become hard to distinguish from one another. So maybe we'll say Latin. Again, you've heard me in a previous video state that Akkadian and Aramaic should be thought of like the Greek and Latin tradition for the West, right? So Akkadian and Aramaic should be considered the Middle Eastern version of Greek and Latin, just because of how Akkadian and Aramaic both influence the languages surrounding them, because they're so prominent for so many years. Same with Greek and Latin. They really influence the landscape of European languages, Western European languages in particular. So there you have it. I hope this video was helpful and useful to you. If you found it so, go ahead and share it, like, subscribe, comment. If I missed anything or you think I could have translated something a little different or better, go ahead and place it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you, and I hope this has been a benefit to you.